Thank you for coming. Uh, so I'm gonna quickly hand it off to Pro Miles here, but I just first wanted to explain some things for anyone who's not fully aware of everything we've been doing. We are getting AASHTO BrR licenses for here in Iowa um, through some consultant licenses, hopefully to help all the LPAs, anyone who's doing load rating in Iowa, to be able to use this product and hopefully help with all the um, changes in new vehicles and all the PCAs and everything like that. So hopefully throughout this training, you'll see some of the benefits and how it might help you and your program specifically. Um, so we have already distributed quite a few licenses for the fiscal year 2025. We have 50 altogether. I think we only have 2 or 3 that haven't been accounted for yet. I did notice there are quite a few consultants and counties here that do not have one of our Iowa specific licenses. So if you already have your own or you just want to see what the program's all about here today, that's fine. But if you do load ratings in Iowa and you are interested in Iowa license, please talk to me and we can maybe discuss fiscal year 2026. And for fiscal year 2026, we should be sending out some notifications and trying to figure out license distribution for the next year coming soon. So with that, I'll kind of hand it over to Pro Miles, and I might jump in here and there with some stuff. So Jeffrey, Carolyn, and Mark, if you could please introduce yourself and get started. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Coyce. I am a technical manager with ProMiles. I work on the analysis engine software development, and prior to working with this software, I also was a bridge load rating and design engineer for many years prior. Mark and Jeff.
Yeah, my name is Mark Melnarski. I manage the quality control and testing of the software, which also includes our support board. So if you generally, if you have questions about the software, you could ask Sean about that, and she could forward it to us if she can't answer it. But we do provide installation support. So if you're having trouble getting the software installed or have issues getting it to run, you can contact our support board, and I will put that email in the chat.
Okay, and I'm Jeffrey Trees. I'm one of the technical leads on the project, and I've been involved with the project now for over 15 years. So been around a while, and yeah, we're here to hopefully get you guys all up to speed and have a good training. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Carolyn to kick us off.
Alrighty. So this is the first of 3 virtual trainings that we're going to be doing over the next week or two. This first session here is going to be kind of an introductory training to BRR. So if you haven't used the software before, we want to kind of cover how the system is set up and help you to get familiar with it. We also are going to walk through a few things with how you can use the software, and we're going to discuss this steel bridge tutorial. Before we get into that, one thing that I just wanted to mention. So if you're in this training, you should have received an email where you can get a temporary license for the training. So if your organization maybe doesn't have a license right now, or maybe only has one license and you wanted to have multiple people be able to do the training, you can go ahead and install the program using that temporary license, and that will be active now through next Friday, which next Thursday is the 3rd of the virtual trainings. So that license will be active during that time period. We do encourage you to get that installed and open. When we're doing these trainings here, we will be walking through a number of different things, and it would be great if you want to follow along and help you get familiar with the software. Um, Additionally, in the email that Sean sent out, we have several different tutorials that go along with each of these virtual trainings. And so we would encourage you to work through these tutorials as well during the time that, the temporary license is active. Um, the one other thing to mention about that as well, if your organization does have other BRR licenses, so if you use it for work currently, um, make sure that if you're doing production work, you're doing it under that license because the temporary license does have some restrictions on being able to export things. So um, that being said, I think we will kind of get started here. Um, we do have a lot of people on the call. So if you have questions as we're going through things, please go ahead and put those questions in the chat, and we will be keeping an eye on the chat and checking in and stopping to answer any questions that you may have as we're working through things. So like I said, please feel free to fire up the software if you have it installed. Any questions in the chat, we will try to address. Um, so so to get started with what we're going to be covering today, I think Jeff is going to kind of give an introduction here, go over some of the library system defaults and Bridge Explorer. Then we will talk about the Bridge workspace analysis and results, where you can find help resources. And then we will kind of walk through a few things, a few notable things with this steel tutorial and answer any questions that you might have about that. Let me see. So I think that kind of covers the introduction here. Jeff, did you want to take over and talk about the libraries?
Yeah, sure. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Um, so I'll be going over, as Carolyn mentioned, I'll be going over the libraries and the Bridge Explorer um, and the system settings. But as Carolyn mentioned, I just wanted to show everyone this, just in case you did not see it. This is the email that we sent out. Since this is being recorded, I omitted the passwords here. I changed them, and they're marked as red. But the actual email will have the credentials that you need to get this. So if you did not get this email and you do not have the software, as Carolyn mentioned, please put a comment in the chat, and we'll make sure we get that over to you. I know a few people didn't get it, but we were able to get it to them by sending them an email directly. And also, as Carolyn mentioned, a few of the tutorials were sent out in advance. One of them was the library training tutorial, and then the library export import tutorial. I'm not going to go over those exactly. I'm going to kind of more uh, do this in a more free-wielding way, and just kind of walk through the different features. And if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to jump in and ask, and then I can demo things live for you. So just to get us started, when you first fire up the software, and I know some of you have already been using it, but there's some of you who probably are seeing this potentially for the first time. The first screen that you land on is the Bridge Explorer. And Carolyn, in a little bit here, is going to go over the Bridge workspace, which is the way you model bridges in BrR. But I'm going to go over the Bridge Explorer. I'm going to go over the library Explorer here, and then also the configuration browser. I think we call this the configuration browser. Um, so just to kick us off, we'll start with configuration, because that's usually the first thing that you need to do when you set up any software, is to get all the options configured, and then you can start going from there. So BRDR is a multi-user software. So unlike a lot of other engineering applications that you may have used, or Excel, even if you use an Excel spreadsheet, this is something that's a lot different than maybe what you're used to seeing. For those of you who are just modeling bridges on your own workstation, this is probably less of an issue. But down the road, as the software more migrates to the cloud, this is going to become more and more of a thing that you're going to need to be aware of. At least have it in the back of your mind that because it's a multi-user application, you may not be granted all of the privileges in the software that you would have as if you're running it on your machine locally. So down the road, if there's something that seems off to you, first question to ask is it due to my permissions? Um, we have several different permission settings here, and several different built-in users. I think our tutorial, we always use the bridge user. I'm currently logged in as the bridge user just to start off on. But if you're with an agency, you may have every user in your department will probably have their own account, and they'll be added to different groups that we have. So we have several built-in groups. Other groups can be added. I'm not going to go into that here, but you can create groups and then you can assign privileges to those groups. So, for example, you might have a situation where, and this probably will not apply to most of you, but you may have a situation where you want your permitting system to have read-only access to your bridge models, but you don't want the permitting system to be obviously able, the credentials to log in for the permitting system, you don't want them to be able to modify the bridge. So in that case, for the bridge description, and you can see here it says it gives you a remark. It says the user is allowed to perform various actions within the bridge workspace and delete bridges. You can give different groups different privileges. So the routing engineer, for example, only has read permission. They can't delete bridges, they can't modify bridges, but they can at least open the bridge and do an analysis. So I'm not going to go through all of the privileges here, but if you click on the individual privilege, you'll see there'll be a little description inside here what it does. We also have a few other options in here. The most notable one, I'm not going to go in the parameters. That's more if you want to set up define county names and route numbers and all that kind of thing. The one that you're most likely going to need to be aware of is the system defaults. So if you double click on that, actually, let me close out these other things. As you see here, this is a tabbed interface, so you can tab between things. I'm just going to close this out. When you're going through, typically an agency will first put their own agency name in here. It's defaulted to AASHTO, but you might want to have like Iowa DOT in here. If you're just running locally on your in a workstation mode, it's not essential that you change that. That's more just for identification purposes when users are logged in the multi-user mode. There are some bridge workspace defaults. Again, I think you just want to leave all these in their default mode. There are some cases where if you're doing substructure design, you might want to have your own custom settings set as the default here. But most likely you can just leave all this stuff alone. System of units, I think we're all in the US, so we're going to use US units. Superstructure analysis, there are some settings here. This option right here has been one of great debate. So the name of this window is System Defaults, and historically this window was meant for system defaults. And what I mean by that is when you create a new bridge or you create new objects within a bridge, historically it would come to the settings that are in this window and it will just set them initially to the settings that were in the defaults. However, at one point, this got added to the system defaults, and this is not a default setting. This is an actual setting. So if you toggle this, it will change how all the bridges in this database run. And the reason that's a problem is because if you have that setting set to one option in your database, and then you send your bridge model to someone else and they load it in, and if they have that option set differently, the bridge model will run differently on their machine. This is something I just wanted to give you a heads up. This is something that we are going to be switching up. This is going to get removed from here at some point down the road. It still is like that in the latest version. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention because if you have the exact same model and you're getting different results, come check the system defaults. It's a little pro tip right there. It'll save you a lot of headaches. Specifications. This is also a setting, and what this does is that in your bridge model, if you're using the default settings for your specifications, which most of you will be, it's going to use the settings for the different engines that are based in here. So It'll use a different specification version and also some default system factors. These are all included with the product. So in most cases, you won't have to modify these. The only time this would ever really change is if your agency or your state agency wanted to upgrade to the latest version of BrR, but at the same time did not want to adopt the latest specifications for some reason. We've seen that case happen from time to time. Substructure analysis, we don't need to go through that. Tolerance, this is another one I wanted to point out, is that this is not a system default. And this causes a lot of problems, especially with for users, especially with curved girder, because there's a lot of rounding with curved structures. Um, we've seen cases where people tweak these numbers because they can't get a result they like. Like, for example, when we're trying to identify if a point of interest is at a certain point along the girder, if you loosen up these tolerances a little bit, sometimes it'll change what something gets snapped to as a default point of interest, and that can cause different results. So another thing to check for is this. And again, this is how it works in the current version, but down the road, we are going to be changing this to where this will be truly a default. And these values will get copied into the bridge model itself, and you'll be able to modify it on a per bridge basis. And I think you'll even be able to modify it on a per structure basis, even within that bridge once we make that change. Because some bridge models, they have a lot of detail packed very close together, and you need to modify the tolerance, but you don't want to do it for every bridge. And furthermore, it gives you a different result if you change it and it's different from someone else's database. Custom agency fields. This is a very basic feature in the program where you can put metadata on the bridge model itself, and the agency can just customize these fields and stick whatever they want in there. We've seen this heavily used by agencies that are migrating from a different software package into BrR, and they use maybe sometimes they want to put some identifiers from the other program in BrR temporarily to be able to cross-reference their models. That's just one example, but sky's the limit on whatever you want to do with these. But again, it won't apply to most of you. And another detail on this is a very basic feature, and once you send the model from one database to another, you kind of lose what the name of those labels are. You still have the data, but the labels don't necessarily go with it unless you import those or set them manually yourself. So one thing I want to demo is the import export. That was one of the tutorials was the library import and export, but I want to show you the system defaults first. So Iowa has created some files here, and the system file that you can get. I think this one might be a little bit older. This one I think is from late last year, but this has all the defaults that for the system defaults that Iowa has established for use. So when you're in the Bridge Explorer, if you click on import, a file browser like this will pop up, and it will up in the title up there. You'll see system data import. And then what you can do is you can navigate to where that file is located, and it has the file extension BRSX, and that stands for bridge. S stands for system data, and the X stands for XML because that's what the contents are inside it. And then you can just click open, and then this window right here will appear, and you can click on the various system data folder types, and you can see different things that are in the data grid here. Okay. And so if you want to import the defaults that Iowa uses for system defaults, you can just select that. Analysis events, these are good to have. These are the analysis templates that Carolyn will kind of demonstrate later. Let me see. Here are the tolerances. Might as well just take all those. So I'll just hit, I'm just going to hit all those. Let's import all of the counties. These are the parameters. And looks like you guys are using one custom agency field, at least in this copy. And I do want to warn you again, this is an older file, just used for demonstration purposes. It may appear slightly different. So if you have the latest file from Iowa DOT and you import it and you see anything slightly different from this demonstration, if you're watching back later, don't worry about it. Whatever's in that file is correct. So I'm going to go ahead and click import. and it says 116 items have been successfully imported. So now I have all of the counties. If I go back into the configuration, if I click parameters and I click on counties, you'll see all of the Iowa counties are listed here. So now we're ready to roll. And let me even click on the system defaults to see if custom agency field. You can see the number one field now says city instead of one. So that was a successful import. Okay, so that's pretty much everything you need to know about the configuration browser. Again, most of you won't need to worry about the access privileges, at least for now, but be aware of them because when we do migrate more to the cloud and you'll start accessing repositories that the agency hosts for you, um, you might start seeing different behavior in the software, and just know that you may not have all the permissions that you had if you run it local. Okay. There's a question here: when the DOT releases
Jeff.
new files.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Mark.
All right. I didn't know if you saw it. Go ahead. You could read it.
It says when the DOT releases new files, it seems like we have to go back and track down and delete outdated ones first before importing again. Is that generally true, or any tips there? Yeah, and that's by design originally. It's not a great design, but it was meant to prevent overwriting because um, what we saw was there were consultants that were doing work for multiple agencies years ago, and it used to just overwrite things. And there's only so many names for counties out there. I'm sure Pennsylvania, I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm sure Pennsylvania has a county that has the same name as a county in Iowa, but the IDs were different. And so consultants were sending bridge models and they weren't matching up, and there were minor issues like that. I don't need to go into the details, but there were some issues. And so um, at the time, and this was probably over 15 years ago, they decided, let's just make it not work. It will warn you and say, hey, you got to delete this out or whatever before you pull the trigger on it. Um, and so you do have to do a little bit of work, and that's meant to just be, that was a quick and dirty trick that was implemented just to kind of make the data a little bit more reliable. That said, I do agree there probably needs to be a better approach, and this has been talked about at length over the years about trying to make a more smooth way of doing it. I think one of the examples that came up actually in the past few years was there are other software packages out there that have profiles. And so what you could do is when you start up BrR as a consultant, you could say, okay, I want the Iowa DOT profile, or I want the Ohio DOT profile, or the PennDOT DOT profile. And by switching, then you can have all of them in your system and toggle between them, but you don't have to like, oh man, I want to work on another state. You don't have to go and delete all of them out. Um, that is something that's being talked about. And I do think we're gonna get there soon, but I apologize that it's a pain right now, but I think that was unfortunately by design. Hope that answers your question, Courtney. Um, okay, the next thing I want to kind of go over is the library. Okay, and this gets even more dry than the previous section, but the library is some built-in, usually standard items that we provide with the software that you can use when you're building your bridge models to pull, standard shapes or AASHTO factors into your bridge model if you need to modify them, for example, or different built-in. There's material types, and also the vehicles are in here. Um, every state kind of customizes this slightly. And Iowa is no different. We actually have another file that you can get. And again, this is probably a slightly outdated version of this file. But to import the library, once you're inside the Library Explorer mode, you can again go to the Bridge Explorer and click on Import. And it's kind of hidden what's called on the backstage. That is another thing that we're trying to iron out and make it a little bit easier to use. You use down the road here. But you can go ahead and select your Iowa DOT library files, BRLX, which stands for Bridge Library XML. Then when you import this, in this mode, it's a little different than the system data. We actually will highlight the folders blue that actually have data in them, so you don't have to like hunt through each one to see what's here. I'm just going to select the root of the library, and I'm going to click the two right arrows. and that'll just import everything that is in this file. Okay, there's a lot of things. I'm going to go ahead and click import, just like we did with the system data. It's the same exact window for the most part. And if this pops up, it says 78 of the 97 library items were successfully imported. So you can see here there's a handful of vehicles that it was not able to import, basically because the names were duplicated for something I already have in my database. When the time comes, if you need to import something and you're not able to import it at the time, just go ahead and submit us a ticket and we can help you resolve this. But you just need to rename either your old vehicle or delete the old vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And now if I go to like the appurtenances and I go to generic, you can see I have all these concrete railings are in here. And these are the Iowa DOT railings. You can see here's a median, some parapets, etc. So all these are now in here. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I'll kind of show you a few of them just so you can kind of get an idea. So here's what a parapet looks like, and you can use these. Now, again, the items in the library are not used directly by the bridge model. These are kind of just, as you can imagine, it's a library. It's like a something that you can start with, but these will get copied into your bridge model. So you don't have to have things in your library that you have in your bridge model. So if someone sends you a file, when you import it, that model will have everything already in it that you need. You don't need to first import anything into the library. And another question we get from time to time, or a pitfall we've seen, is that people will go to their library and they'll change something in here and say, hey, I changed this from like an 18 to a 19 and it's not being reflected in my bridge model. And the answer to that question is because this is just a library item. You have to copy that into your model and use the one in your model. And so if you need to change something, you do it in the bridge model and not in the library. And Carolyn will talk about that here in a little bit. Okay. All right. Maybe another good one to show will be vehicles, because everyone loves vehicles. So I'll go ahead and click on an Iowa vehicle. And you can see here with this vehicle, here's the name, a little description, and then you have the axle load, and then the geometry is in here. You may note over on the right-hand side, there are some check boxes here. It says LRFD, ASR, LFR, LRFR. What these indicate is these are just to enable this vehicle to work in those different types of analysis runs. So if you uncheck these, they will not show up. This vehicle will not show up in any of those rating modes. So by default, they're all turned on. That means you can use this vehicle in all of those analysis types. There's also some additional information, tandem and lane, if you need to include that information. And then also, when you select a vehicle, you can also click schematic, and it will actually give you a diagram of the axle spacings or configuration. BrR also supports non-standard gauge vehicles. And this allows you to specify all that. We don't have any, so I can't demo any of those for you right now. Let's look here. But yeah, we support all these different standard material to our steel shapes, so like angles, rolled beams, etc. Let's see what else we have here. We'll do a pre-stress eye, but we don't need to beat this to death. I mean, you guys kind of get the idea of it. Carolyn or Mark, do you guys have anything else to add about the library?
Yeah, just go ahead, Carolyn.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, and I know, Jeff, you mentioned this, but just to reiterate it because it is important. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later when we talk about using libraries in the Bridge workspace. But if you modify any of these library items and then save that to the library, that means that library item is now changed. Like we'll show you a little bit later how you can copy an item from the library and make modifications to it that are just for that bridge. But just wanted to kind of mention and reiterate that You can import all of those library items, but if you modify them within this library window, then that stays with that library item and it'll be used for the bridges you use it for. So that's all I had.
Yeah,
Mark?
yeah, yeah. Well, let me add on to that, Carolyn. So one of the features that's on the roadmap as well is a history feature. So you'll be able to see the history of that shape because we've had some agencies where um, young engineers go in there and they don't know exactly what to change, and they change one of their library items, and then we'll get a phone call and they'll say, "Hey, we upgraded to the latest version of BrR, and our library is all corrupted, and the values are different." And we dig into it, and we find out that someone changed it. So we're going to start providing a history feature in the bridge model and also in the library, where you'll be able to see the history of that object and see how it has changed over time, and it will even put the user account that made the change in there. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, the whole purpose of the library is that you have you have things that are commonly used that you could move over. So we deliver a large amount of information that's commonly used, but you may have something specific in your state, say, for example, concrete grades. And defining it in the library just allows you to grab it and use it whenever you need to. And you don't have to, that's less input you have to do on the component part of it. So it's a very convenient way for you to build your model so that you don't have to keep redefining it for every bridge model that you do.
Yeah, good point, Mark. And also that brings me maybe to the last point here about the data is that we have this column here called library and it has standard and agency defined. Agency defined is self-describing. It's the agency defined library object, and you can delete the agency defined ones because you kind of own them if you have the permissions, I should add. Standard ones are the ones that we've added to the database, and they're built into BRR, and you cannot delete them. Um, and that's what will show up over here. This radio button over here that says standard and agency defined is read only. And then also once you make a new library item, a lot of them have the stored units as the US or SI. Once you create a library object, um, the first time you save it, it will make that read only. So you cannot change something that is in SI units to US or vice versa. Okay, that's an important detail. If you accidentally set it as the wrong units and you realize that, you have to just delete and recreate um, the item. Another thing you can do real quick is just to show you here. You can click on like let's say a shape, and up on the ribbon up here we have a duplicate button, and you can press that, and then what it will do is it'll copy that one so you can kind of tweak something and give it a new name and change the properties of it, and it will let you do that. And then you can also just click the new button up here and it will give you a blank one if you want to add anything. Okay, I think that beats the library to death. Is there a way to save an updated component in a bridge model back into the library item? Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes. Um, and when we get into the bridge, we'll make a note of that question. And when we get into the bridge workspace, when Carolyn is demonstrating the bridge workspace and she's copying something from the library, we'll have some fun and copy something back into the library from the bridge workspace for you, just to show you how that works. So I'm making a note right now. Copy to library. Okay, cool. We're already having a lot of fun. Okay. Um, and then finally, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, and I know this topic, these things are rather dry. They're not as exciting as modeling the bridge, but it's important. If you walk away with anything from this demonstration, I hope you just kind of keep some stuff in the back of your mind. And if you run into a problem, you might be able to pull that stuff out of your back pocket and resolve the issue before you have to submit a ticket and wait for us to get back to you. Um, so this is the Bridge Explorer, and this is the starting point of the program, and this gives you a list of all the bridges in your database. By default, it'll start off in the all bridges mode. So these are kind of different filters. I know they have a filter, they have a folder icon, but I think I'm trying to get people to think of these as filters because they they're all showing the same bridges. These are not like if you copy a bridge from the all bridges folder into one of these folders, it's not like copying a file on your computer. Um, it is the same bridge. And I've seen that now a few times cause some confusion, and I want to change the name of that because it is causing confusion. Um, but when it starts off in the all bridges mode, in some cases, especially if you're dealing with an agency database, even if you're just working locally right now on your machine, sometimes you can have thousands of bridges in this view, and it can be a lot to look at, and it makes it sometimes difficult to find the bridge that you're working on. So if you click on the View tab, there are some grayed out buttons here, and it's because my database is pretty small, but there's a Retrieve All button and a Retrieve Next. And in the user preferences, which I'll show you here in a moment, um, you could say, hey, only load the first 50 bridges or the first 500 bridges, and it just makes it run a little bit quicker. And also it just makes it so you don't have a massive list of things. And if you want to see everything, you can just click Retrieve All or retrieve the next group of bridges. And if you're working in a networked environment and someone makes a change, you can just come up here and click the refresh button, and that'll requery this list and it will update. So if someone changed something and you're trying to find it, you can just click the refresh button and it'll refresh the view. Let me click on. So I don't want to go into too much detail about how these filters work because some of them are simple. And I could probably demo that real quickly, but some of them can get pretty complicated. And this is actually a feature that we're currently in the process of overhauling in the next few versions. You'll see it in a couple years here. Uh, Eventually, you'll be able to query on any attribute in the bridge model and build a folder, um, a filter based on any attribute that you want. So if you want to see any bridges that have a span over 300 feet, or if you want to um, find every bridge that you've painted yellow, or whatever attribute you want to query on, you can make a folder or a filter that will do that. Those are what the red ones are. Those are kind of like query based folders. The yellow ones are more just like standard filters that you can drag things into. So if you want to create a new folder, this window over here will pop up, and it was really large. And I'm just going to call it a list, and I'm going to call it my bridges. Okay, and I'm just going to click Save Folder. So now there's a My Bridges folder here. It has a little person on it, and that's because only I can see that folder, the way I created that list-based folder. And then let's say I'm working on a couple bridges for a project. So I can select a couple bridges here, and I can drag those into My Bridges folder. Okay. I keep calling it folder because that's what we call it, and I got to break my habit, but it's a filter essentially. But now those bridges are in here in the My Bridges. Okay. And so when I start up the program, it's going to start up in the all bridges, and I can just go straight to that folder, that My Bridges folder filter, and I can see the bridges I'm currently working on. And then that cuts through the noise. So if you're only working in a small database, it's probably not too much of an issue. Again, that's a little pro tip. Uh, we'll have users every once in a while that will talk to us directly or via support, and they'll say, I'm working on this one bridge. And every time I start a BRDR, I have to search for it. I have to hunt for it. It's a big pain in the butt. And we show them exactly this tip: create a little folder, call it My Bridges, put it somewhere, and drag the ones that you're working in there, and then you can click to it. People say, "Wow, I didn't even realize I could do that," and it only takes a few seconds to do it. So that is a little pro tip. If you wanted to create a filter folder or a filter that multiple users can see, and you want it to just be a list based, you click on list and you could say my my groups uh, my groups bridges, okay, and then you can make that folder ownership public, okay, and that way everybody who logs into this database will be able to see it, and you can see this one just has a normal yellow folder icon there. And then anybody who logs into this database then will see that then. And then you could drag stuff into there just like before. So you can have a set of bridges. And like, let's say you're working on a project together in a group and you want all the bridges for that project. You can create a folder like that and drag them in there. It's just a great way to share the information. Again, I mentioned I don't want to go over these red ones too much, but I will kind of show you something real quick. What you can do is you can create a new folder, and instead of saying list space, you can leave it as filter. Um, and let me see here. We have any? Okay, so here's one. I can see I have a couple bridges that are in District 1. So, um, District 1, I'll go ahead and let me add that. Okay, so I'll say District in 1, and I could say D1 bridges or something. I'll make it public. Okay, and I'll click Find Now. You can see it found some, and I'm going to click Save Folder. Okay, so D1 bridges. This is a filter folder called D1 bridges, and you can see all the District 1 bridges show up in here. And what's cool about this is that it's not like a list like these yellow ones are. This one is always, every time you click on it, it's doing a query. So if I go out here and go to one of these bridges and let me see here. I think there's a way I can copy the bridge and I paste it. And then it's saying copy of. I'm just going to click OK. Okay. So now it created a copy of that bridge right here, bridge 32. And if I click up here, you'll now see I didn't even have to do anything to this folder, this filter folder here, and that new bridge shows up in here. So right now you can for those red folders, you can only query attributes on the bridge that are kind of at the top level of the bridge model. You can't query any attribute. So there's currently no way to say I want to see all of the bridges over 300 feet. But that is a feature that's going to be coming soon in the next few versions. We're working on the first iteration of it um, in one of our next work plans, and we'll be enhancing it a little further down the road. But eventually, you'll be able to query anything. Like I said, if you want to see all of the yellow bridges in your state, that's not currently an attribute in BrR, but someday it probably will be. So you'll be able to do that. So trying to think what else to demonstrate in here. Probably another important thing would be to show you how to export and import bridges. So I'm just going to try to export these. Let's say you have 3 bridges and you want to send them to one of your colleagues or whatever. You can come up here to this batch on the ribbon, and you can hit the little drop down, and it'll say batch export. You click that, and this window will pop up. It's kind of large. And then you can press export, and then you can find a location for it. I'm just going to export them to my desktop. Click OK. Okay, so it has now exported those 3 bridges. They appear on my other monitor. Let me move them over here. So you can see there are those 3 models that it exported.
Yeah, just to comment on this one, Jeff. So if you're ever having an issue with your bridge, I mean, certainly you could send them to your colleagues, but if you have a question for Sean, or if you send anything to the support board, one of the first things we'll ask you is for your bridge. So if you have a problem with something and you're trying to get it resolved, you can export your bridge, explain your problem, and say see the attached bridge. So generally, in order to look at it, we need this exported file, and we need to know what your analysis settings were, like which vehicles you ran, which specification you used, and some specifics about it. So those are the 3 most important things you have to include when you are asking a question about something, and that's the bridge itself, the analysis settings, and the specification that you used.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And then for importing a model, you can just click the import button. If you use this import button, you can only import 1 bridge at a time. And then we also have a batch import, which works just like the batch export. You can just select a group and then it'll go ahead and import them. Now, I will say with batch import, if the bridge name is already in use, which in this case, since I exported it from this database, it won't let you batch import them. So if I go ahead and select import, I'm just going to click on Training Bridge 1, this file. It will open it up, but if I go to save it, it'll throw an error and it'll say cannot save, please enter a unique bridge ID, because this bridge already exists in this database. So this is another potential sometimes pain point, because some users say, hey, I want to send it to someone, I want them to make a couple modifications, and I want them to send it back to me. Unfortunately, right now you have to delete you have to delete the old bridge first in your database, then you can go ahead and import. And one little pitfall also I will show you is I'm going to go ahead and delete Training Bridge 1, and then this is probably the last part that we need to talk about. So I go ahead and delete Training Bridge 1. I'm going to go ahead and try to import Training Bridge 1 again. And now that I deleted it, it should save. So I'm going to head, but it says here, it says bridge ID is not unique. But you saw I deleted the old one, right? So people will say, hey, there's something wrong. I deleted that bridge. Um, but the gotcha is that you have to go to the deleted bridge folder. It's kind of like your recycling bin in Windows. And you have to delete it from here as a final delete. This is sort of just like a safety net in case you accidentally delete the bridge, you can recover it. So once you delete it from here, it's permanently deleted. It could take a moment to delete if there's a lot of data in that bridge model. But then once it's deleted out of here, we can go back to the all bridges. I'm going to go ahead and import Training Bridge 1. Okay, and click Save. Okay, and then you can see now down here, Bridge 33 is now Training Bridge 1. With that, I think there's only one other thing I would like to show you before I turn it over to Carolyn, and that is the user preferences. So if you're in the Bridge Explorer and you click on Preferences, this window will pop up. There's not much on it currently. Can't resize it, it seems. But you can change the sort order of the bridge list. You can do it in descending or ascending order. You can pick how many bridges you want to show when you first start up the program. You can drop this down from 500 to 50 if you want. It doesn't matter. Bridge workspace. It says validate before saving. So every time you press the save button, you'll notice a little window will pop up. It will have a whole bunch of comments on there. If you get tired of looking at that, you can uncheck this option here. Oops. You can uncheck that option and that will go away. I'm not going to go into all the details for every option, but there's this other one here. You can, for your backup, you can change the backup location, confirm, delete, analysis. The only other one I want to kind of point out is that the analysis engine report folder. So you can change the output location for results. So you can override it by unchecking these boxes. And yeah, so we're not going to go over all these, but yeah, those are the important ones. So with that, I think that's everything. Does anybody have any other questions? Is there a way to save an updated component back? Oh, that was the one we're going to talk about in a little bit. So with that, Carolyn, do you want to show us how to use the Bridge workspace?
Yes. Let me share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So real quickly, so we'll get into the Bridge workspace here. I wanted to just also mention, so like a lot of the things that Jeff went through here with the Bridge Explorer, having all of these bridges, in kind of one database here is something that, a lot of different DOTs have kind of put input on over the years and kind of built the system. So it allows for agencies to kind of manage their structure inventory, but it's also really set up for engineers as well for load rating software. So a lot of what we kind of covered in the Bridge Explorer relates a lot to kind of your management of your whole inventory. And what we're going to get into now is kind of more the engineering, what you're going to do when you're modeling individual bridges. So when you download the software, there are some kind of example training bridges that are installed in the database. We're going to take a look at one of these here just to kind of go over some concepts, and then we're going to look a little bit at the Steel tutorial bridge as well. I do use this database for a number of different things. So I sometimes change bridges in it. So if you happen to be looking at this bridge and you see things a little bit different than what I'm showing here, it's nothing to worry about. So basically what happens when you want to create a new bridge, the first thing that you're going to see is this window here where you'll enter your bridge ID and structure ID and just some information about your bridge. Each bridge does have to have a unique name, so that is one thing you'll run into if you try and save something with a duplicate name. It will flag that. And this is again just information about your bridge and location,
Carolyn,
custom
one
agency.
comment, one comment on the duplicate name. The other input item that you can't have a duplicate of is the NBI structure ID. So
Yes.
if you have the same number as something else in your database, it'll flag that and not let you save it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yes, no, that's correct. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, and bridge ID and NBI structure ID do need to be unique. Um, and if you do have, and one thing I will mention, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. If you do have kind of two different versions of a bridge, you can actually save both of those within the bridge as different alternatives for the bridge. So we'll talk a little bit more in just a few minutes here about alternatives. But yeah, the bridge is the model for that whole bridge, and you can include different alternatives or versions of it within that same file. Um, so that is what you see when you go to create a new bridge. I'm going to open up this existing bridge here just to talk a little bit about kind of what you do next. So you'll populate this window. You can always get back to that just by double clicking here at the top of the bridge workspace tree. So one of the first things that you're going to want to do is to define your components. Now, this kind of touches back on what Jeff was talking about with the library items and how you actually use library items from within a bridge workspace. So when you're using one of these types of like a bridge component, a beam shape or appurtenance, things like that, when you're using those from a library, you're making a copy of that library item and then saving it to this bridge. And so I know, Jeff talked about this, but just to reiterate, once you copy it from the library to the bridge, if you change that library item after the fact, it doesn't change what's in the bridge. Like once you copy it, this is a copy. So if I am, let's say, going to create a bridge and maybe I want to put in my concrete. And I know I've already got concrete materials in the library, so I can go to copy from library and I see a few different options here. So I think this class A US is this, let's say, for example, this looks similar to what I want to use, but maybe I want to do, I don't know, 6 KSI instead. What I can do is I can say, okay, I'm going to copy this from the library. And well, I'll show a couple things here. So this is just the library item as is, the 4K concrete. So we've got this here. If you want to modify this version of it, you can do that. You can do it when you copy it in, or you can do it by opening back up the item here. So let's say I want to do 6 KSI concrete, and I'm going to change the compressive strength to 6. Then I'm going to go ahead and recompute the modulus of elasticity and modulus of rupture based on the new concrete strength. And so now I have this new material. So this is not the library item. This is a concrete material that is just in this bridge and it's stored only to this bridge. So this can now be used as, for anything that I'm modeling in this bridge. This, to kind of go back to the question that we had earlier about can you save items from your bridge back to your library? If you have something like this and you say, hey, you know what, I actually use 6K concrete all the time. I want to save this to my library. You can open that material here and then you can do this copy to library button and it'll tell you that material was successfully copied to the library. You can say, okay. And then if I go, close that out. If I go back over here and look in the library under concrete materials, you should be able to see my 6 KSI. Here we go. This is the one I just created. So this 6 KSI concrete is now library material, and that will now be accessible from the library in any of the other bridges that I'm working in. So, um, so let's see. Yeah. So basically when you're setting up your bridge, one of the first things that you'll do is probably come through here and sort of define the elements that you're going to be using, the beam shapes, materials, factors, all that kind of stuff. Once you've copied those from the library, and you can always create new ones in here as well. They don't have to be a library item. You can just create a new item and enter whatever properties you want. And again, when you do that, it'll save it to this bridge unless you specifically copy it to the library. All right, so once you have your components defined, then they basically become available in your bridge model, in the bridge workspace. And I guess just kind of the sort of brief kind of summary of the logic or process with the bridge modeling here. It is like a parametric input and properties. If you've worked with, there are all different types of analysis programs out there. Some of them you basically just model geometry and it'll get you forces and stresses. But one of the things with BrR is that it does do really in-depth and current spec checking. And so to be able to do that, it is basically a parametric data entry process. So once you've defined your components, as well as like some of these other things that may be, used on that bridge, diaphragms, lateral bracing, the first thing that you'll do is then create your superstructure definition, and that's where you kind of lay out the, overall geometry of the bridge. And then once you've done that, you'll go and create the actual members and assign them. So for the superstructure definitions that we have here, a girder system and girder line, as well as like floor system and line, trusses, concrete slab system, concrete multi-cell box, advanced concrete multi-cell box. I think, you're going to be generally working with girder system, or, other system type of structures. The advantage to that is that when you have the entire bridge modeled as opposed to like just one girder, it allows the program to do some of the work for you in terms of computing distribution factors, computing dead loads based on your structure layout. It also allows you flexibility when you're running your analysis, especially for like permitting analysis, if you want to, let's say, restrict a load to a certain portion of the structure. So, Iowa DOT with all the template models and all of their models use the system models for these. So just to kind of explain, though, the line models that are here is if you were in a situation where you just wanted to model like one girder out of a system, when you do that, you do have to enter a little bit more information because there's not, enough there for the program to compute certain things. But again, I think in general there are a lot of advantages to doing the system superstructure. So I think if you're working for Iowa DOT, that's probably what you're going to be working with. So once you create your system your superstructure, this is basically the first window you'll see. And this is basically where you'll just define, your spans and girders and span length. There are also some other analysis options in here that'll apply to this structure. Most of this here relates to 3D finite element analysis parameters. We won't go into that in a ton of depth right now, but there are some options here. If you are running 3D analysis, there you have the ability to sort of adjust how that model is created. And then in this tab here, we have the spec version. So the system default is going to, default to the current version of the specification at that time. But you could always do override, and you can select like previous versions of specifications if you want to see, differences. If you want to check if there are differences between different versions of the specs, and how that might affect your structure, this is where you can do that. The engine tab, I mean, we're going to be using the AASHTO engines for this, so I don't think we really need to cover much there. So then we've got a couple of things here. I'll just sort of, I think, quickly go through some of these. But the first few windows that you're going to see here again are just sort of setting up the kind of the main aspects of the structure. This impact dynamic load allowance will, default to standard impact unless you have a reason to override it. So most of the time you probably won't need to do anything with that. Load case descriptions is where you can kind of create your load cases and assign them to different load stages for like composite, non-composite, and the load types. There is this default load case descriptions, but you can always just do new and and do any kind of custom load cases that you want to. And those will be used a little bit later when we start assigning those to the different components. The next thing you're going to see is your framing plan detail, where you'll set up like the skew, girder spacing, and then you can enter your diaphragms or lateral bracing. So this is basically where you'll lay all that out. Once you've got that entered, you can right-click framing plan and do schematic. There's a few things within the program, more than a few, where there are schematics in here. They're not super fancy, but they are really helpful for, kind of quickly catching any kind of input errors. And so I think, over the course of the next few years, I mean, I think there's a lot of interest in kind of some more advanced schematics, graphics, 3D graphics. Not even just because it's, I don't know, looks nice and is fancy and stuff, but it can be very, very helpful in kind of quickly identifying anything that gets mistyped. So I will try and mention the schematics that we've got in here as we go through. All right, so we're not going to be doing any kind of bracing spec checking right here, but if, again, like for curved girder bridges, if you do want to spec check diaphragms and stuff, because those are considered main load carrying members, the program does have the ability to do that. So this is where you can set some of those things if you have the need to. I won't go through all of these windows in a ton of detail here. I'm just trying to kind of hit on the important stuff. But structure typical section, this again is where you'll kind of lay out your cross section for your bridge. And this is where you'll basically assign like the appurtenances that we copied from the library. So this is where we'll kind of put those parapets in place, assign a load case to them. And so you can see we kind of like the general process is sort of create these components. And as we go through the process, you're sort of pulling them together and kind of setting them up to work together the way they should. We do one other one just to point out here, the lane position tab. So this is basically where you set your travel way for where your vehicle position can be located. This window also does have a schematic as well. Now this does just show a typical section. So if, for example, you have like a flared structure right now, so this button here will let you go switch from start to end. One thing that I think and hope that we will be adding in the future will be, more of an ability to cut a cross section through any particular point on your structure. But I just want to I want to try and make a note on some of this, where some of the schematics are as we go through. And again, you can get to those by right-clicking and then clicking schematic. Superstructure loads, I think the main thing that might be of interest in this window is the dead load distribution. Here you have a few different options for how dead load can be distributed in the different stages. Again, you probably won't need to, mess with it all that much, but there are some options there if there's ever a need to do that. So here we have stiffener definitions. Again, this is fairly straightforward, just defining stiffeners. Or if you have, let's say, pre-stress, you'll see shear connectors, stuff like that, or shear reinforcements there, sorry. So there's kind of like our overall structure layout. So once we've got that part of it set up, this is where we'll come in and basically create the individual members. Let me think here. I'll talk a little bit about just kind of what we've got here, and then I want to talk about member alternatives because that is a pretty important topic here. So when you go to create members, you can create different member alternatives. So this G1, 2, 3, 4, these get set based on the number of girders that you've entered in this window. So when you're creating your superstructure and you set your number of girders here, that's what's going to determine how many girders show up, further down the tree. So for each girder, we've got some loads here, and this will basically just cover any kind of additional loads that aren't included in the components that we've already modeled. So like, for example, when we create the structure typical section here, the deck thickness that you enter here is used for like the dead load. So that load is already, going to be computed by the software. Same with your appurtenances, parapets, wearing surface, all that kind of stuff. So if it's a component that you've entered here in your typical section, that will be used by the software to compute the dead loads on the structure. This member loads here basically just allows you to enter any kind of additional or maybe kind of unusual loads that aren't covered in, the things that we've already defined here, or like the self weight of the girder, that we're going to enter down here. That also is used by the software to calculate, the loads. But so this would be for things like maybe attached utilities, stay in place forms, other kind of, less common loads that aren't accounted for in the components that we're modeling. And then here we've got support conditions. We've got the kind of general or line girder, the supports that are used for like a 2D finite element analysis versus then 3D finite element analysis. I would encourage that we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to analysis settings. But if you're working with a system model, a lot of times you're going to want to run a 2D finite element analysis. It's quick and it does the job for a lot of things. But you do have the option to run 3D analysis as well. And if you do that, one thing is just to make sure that your support conditions are set the way that you want them to be. A lot of bridges are, especially if it's just sort of like, a straight sort of, I don't know, normal bridge. A lot of those bridges are designed kind of, as line girders essentially. And so then when you create this 3D finite element model, the support constraints that have either like just a little bit too much fixity or whatnot can kind of cause some, unusual results in a structure just depending on how the supports are set. So this is one of the things you'll want to look at if you are running a 3D analysis, just to make sure that these support conditions are set the way that you intend them to be. Let's see. Okay, so member alternatives. So when we double click member alternatives, we have a bunch of different kind of material types and girder shapes. Now, one thing that I think pretty much always tends to confuse people a little bit when they're sort of getting familiar with the software is, what is the deal with member alternatives and bridge alternatives? Like, why do we need alternatives? And the short reason for this is basically that, aside from like, if like, let's say you're load rating a bridge, you're working with that one bridge. But this software is also used by, departments of transportation and structure owners who might be working with thousands of bridges. And so if an agency has, thousands of bridges in their inventory, but then they have, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 copies of like different versions of structures for different bridges, that quickly becomes difficult to manage. So what this does is it allows you to keep kind of different versions of things within that actual bridge. So for example, when this bridge is new, that let's say this girder gets modeled as the, as built girder. Everything's in good shape. There's no deterioration. Everything's kind of the way it's supposed to be. Then, maybe years down the road, there's an inspection and they see that maybe there's some deterioration. Maybe there's been something, I don't know, a utility line attached to a girder, some other added loads, things like that. What you can do and what the agency can do then is basically create a new alternative. And so you don't have to delete your models, but it also allows you to kind of keep the model of the structure throughout its service life. And there are a lot of reasons that can be useful just in terms of kind of evaluating the impact of deterioration and a lot of different things, loads that are added over the years. But you could have, let's say, like an as-built and let's say, so this will be our as-built girder. And then this will be, let's say this will be our 2025 girder. And if I want to go in here and, based on, let's say the 2025 inspection, maybe there is some deterioration. If, let's say we enter that here, say percent. All right. So this is basically kind of the girder that we have now. Now we've got two girders. So then what we want to do is go back into this girder, because remember the number of members that get set here comes from the superstructure definition. So this is like how many real girders are there in the bridge. Like there really are 4, even though there's 2 different versions of this one, right? So basically what we want to do is we want to say, okay, this is the current one now. So we want to come in here, change this to existing and current, and then save this. And the reason why this is important. So the reason why this is important is when you run an analysis from, let's say, the superstructure definition level, it means that this girder is the one that's going to be included in that analysis, not this girder. Same when you run a batch analysis from the Bridge Explorer. So this is a pretty common thing, running batch analysis from the Bridge Explorer. If you have, let's say, like a permit vehicle and you want to check, let's say, I don't know, these 3 bridges. I'm not going to, yeah, let's just do this. So I'm not gonna run an actual permit vehicle. I'll just put, well, okay, I'll do this. Not a real permit vehicle, but that's okay. So this is gonna run like this batch analysis from the Bridge Explorer. Now, the way that this knows what to use within the bridge model are the elements that are set to existing and current. So that's why it is really the bridge alternative and member alternative. It can be a little counterintuitive at first, but it is super important, because when you're doing like batch analysis and permit analysis, you want to make sure that you have, the real version, the current version of what's out there in that bridge. You want to make sure that that is marked as existing and current, to make sure that that's the member that gets evaluated. So you'll see here after I ran this batch analysis, this is going through and it's showing the structures and the components that were evaluated. And so this shows here this plate girder 2025 is the one that was included in here. So this is the one that I just modified in that bridge workspace and put that deterioration in. So that means that, if I'm running a permit truck right now, it's using the current, real version of that girder. So that is important. I guess while I'm here, I'll just show you the results on this batch analysis. I don't know why these are zeros. I just picked random bridges that I I don't know. But if you can come in here and you can see structure rating results, member rating results. And so this will just, it's not a ton of information in this window, but it'll show you your your overall rating. And so again, this is used a lot for permitting. So it is really important, as you're working with these bridge models to pay attention to the member alternatives and the bridge alternatives that are getting set. So again, you can always check those. There's a few ways that you can check things here. So in members, you'll see here if you have two different options of something, make sure the one that you want included in that analysis is the one that's checked. And then it also shows this EC here, existing current, which indicates that this is the one that we're including there. And well, there's a little bit more to talk about here with the actual plate girder stuff and the girder itself. But since I'm on the topic of alternatives, I want to just also mention that this kind of it's the same thing for a similar idea anyways for bridge alternatives. And if you're attending the next couple of virtual trainings that we're going to be doing, we will be touching back on this a few times, the whole concept of bridge alternatives and member alternatives, because this is I mean, probably almost everyone I've talked to who just starts working with the software finds this to be a little counterintuitive at first, but it is a really powerful, valuable feature to structure owners. So this is something that we will be revisiting, in the upcoming trainings as well. But just like you can have a couple of different member alternatives, but there's really only kind of one real existing current one, it's kind of the same thing with bridge alternatives. So under superstructure definitions, I can have another superstructure definition. And so let's say I was looking at maybe, I don't know, looking at a structure that I was considering a structure replacement or something like that. You can have a couple of different bridges within that superstructure. But regardless of how many are here, even if you only have one, you will need to come in and create this bridge alternative. And this is what again tells the tells the software what should actually be included when you're doing that analysis. And so this is where you'll see here, this is showing existing and current superstructure. And so that's this simple span structure here. So this, for example, like maybe, let's say a DOT was thinking about even, let's say, I don't know, you wanted to just check if you add, like you're looking at like a roadway repaving and you want to check if adding a couple of inches of wearing surface is going to end up restricting your bridge. Maybe you create a new superstructure definition to evaluate that, but you don't want that to actually be, the structure that's used for permitting because it's not currently out there yet. You can still have that alternative in here because it's something that you want to check and look at, but it's not the one that's saved to the bridge alternative, meaning that it won't be the one that's used when you're running like a permit analysis or something like that. So again, I know it's kind of quickly going over a lot of information there. We will be revisiting that through the next couple of training courses as well. Let's see here. I guess just to then just briefly kind of go back to a few more things about the actual member alternatives. So once you've created member alternative here, I'm going to switch this back.
Yeah, and again, if anybody has any questions as Carolyn goes through this, please feel free to drop it in the chat.
Yes. So I just want to get rid of this one here. So basically, if this is marked as your existing current, it won't let you delete it. So what I did here was I just went in here and switched it back to this first one. Now that means I'm going to be able to delete this one. So, all right, got rid of that. So this is where basically you'll create a girder. We do have spec overrides here as well, factors, engine. Again, you won't really need to do much with engine stuff. One thing to note is control options. So these are basically analysis options that'll allow the engineer to make determinations on, let's say, like where different analysis points are generated, or some different kind of analysis methods or options that may be applicable to certain structures, maybe not to others. I think with and we'll be talking about the Iowa DOT template models in I think the third virtual training. But again, like if your agency, has policies or preferences on which things they want allowed or not allowed, always, make sure to I guess check on that. And so there probably won't be a whole lot that you have to change in here, but there are things in here that are probably, worth reviewing, worth considering when you're doing your load rating analysis. All right, so that's where we kind of create then again, you can reopen that by double clicking this. So that's where we get our member alternative. Default materials is just the materials that'll be used default, but we're going to assign materials anyways, so we don't need to worry about that. Again, this allows you to override the impact specifically for an individual member. This applies to the whole structure. This applies to individual member. And here we'll basically kind of create the girder profile. Any, do like varying web depth, things like that. So that's where we'll set that up. Hinge locations, splices. We're not going to really get too in depth on splices and stuff here today. Deck. Oh, one thing I do want to note here on the deck profile tab. So earlier up here, we set up the structure typical section, and this is where we enter like the width and we put a deck thickness here. So this is the deck thickness that's used for dead load. In the deck profile here, this is the deck thickness that's going to be used for structural properties for a composite beam. So I'm right here just going to click compute from typical section, enter structural thickness to use. So I'm going to say we're going to go ahead and use that same thickness as structural thickness, but sometimes you'll maybe want to consider like I don't know, sometimes they'll have like the first half inch of the deck or something is not effective as, for structural thickness, you can, let's say you want to do 9.5 here instead of 10, or something like that. This will be the structural thickness that's used for composite section. So let's see. What was the other thing I was going to touch on here? Haunch profile. Again, this is basically used in the offset between the beam and the deck when it's computing the composite section. You can define your lateral support ranges and locations, stiffeners, bearing stiffeners, and then live load distribution here. So the live load distribution, when you first create the bridge, these are going to be blank. And you can run the analysis even if these are blank. They'll just be computed at runtime. Or you can compute them in this window and save them. I think that with the Iowa DOT models, they're being computed at runtime. But if you ever do want to, look at the distribution that's being computed here, you can do compute from the typical section, and then you can do view calcs, and you can see a report here that'll come up that shows you, the values that it's using and the way that it's computing those distribution factors. So there's a bunch of information about that there. And then you can also manually override it. So, these are the AASHTO computed values, but if for some reason I, make the engineering determination that this should be something different, I can, enter the values that I want it to use and save those. I'll recompute that. And then let's see, only a couple things left here. So points of interest, this kind of allows you to like specify individual points if you do need to do, let's say, a capacity override, something like that. We're not going to go into that in a ton of depth here today, but there are ways that you can pick a specific point on the structure and override the capacity or something if you need to do that. And then, like we said, deterioration profile, where you can enter deterioration for that member. Um, let's see. One other thing to note is that you can copy and paste here. So once I've set up one of these girders, if I want to copy this and then just paste it into the rest of these girders here, you can do that. You don't have to define each one individually. It's just right click, copy, right click, paste. So that can help to save a lot of time. And again, like, even if, let's say, you create that edge girder, copy paste it, then once it's copied, you can, change anything that needs to be changed about it. It's just a separate copy at that point. One thing to note is that if you have computed distribution factors before you copy it, those factors will be copied as well. So if you're copying a girder that's, let's say, an exterior girder, and then you paste that into this here, an interior girder, it's probably going to have different distribution factors. So you'll probably want to go in and recompute those. Is just, I guess, the one thing to point out there. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, so for this, we don't have schematics on this bridge. Why is that? A lot of it depends. Sometimes for schedule or cross section based, there are a few things where we won't have the profile schematic. I'll show you when we look at this other bridge. There are a lot of times there will be like a girder profile schematic here too that you can right click and open.
Yeah, if it's cross-section based, we don't have schematics for that, I think. Just
Right.
schedule based. So
Yeah, and this is just this training bridge here that I kind of randomly picked. So this one just happens to not have that. But I think most of what you will be working with is schedule based, and so those should have those cross sections. Is this schedule base? That's not right. Hold on. Okay. Anyways, yeah. A few types we don't have them. A lot of them we do. Um, Okay, so that's where we've kind of got the bridge sort of set up, defined, and then the bridge alternative. And like I said, we'll be kind of reiterating and revisiting the oh, I see in the chat. Thank you. I was clicking the wrong place. Um, there we go. There we've got our plate girder schematic. Yeah,
thank you, Angelica.
yes, thank you. Yeah, so like I said, we do have that's why I was getting a little confused there. I was like, I was pretty sure we do have it for this kind of garter. And then I wasn't seeing it, and I'm like, I know there are a couple we don't, but most of them do. This was really throwing me off. So thank you for posting that. But yeah, this is our plate girder schematic here. So we'll see. It'll note any deterioration locations as well as like your plate sizes, and other dimensions and stuff like that. Let's see. One thing that I think, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, and I don't know if this will be in the software anytime soon, but I'm trying to kind of mention the schematic locations as we go through because sometimes people don't necessarily know that they're there. So the ones we've showed here, framing plan, bridge typical section, girder profile, you kind of got to know where to click. And even here, like using the software a lot, I was like kind of forgetting where to click. And so at some point too, I think as we look at adding different schematics, there will be kind of some more controls even from up here in the ribbon to, help users kind of more easily navigate to some of the schematic capabilities we have. So, um, alrighty. So, okay, so I think that covers kind of the quick overview of the bridge workspace. The only other couple of things I want to just take a look at here. So analysis settings. So once you've got the bridge all modeled and set up and you want to run the analysis, there's a few different ways you can do that within the bridge workspace. You can run it for an individual girder, you can run it for the superstructure definition, or you can run it for the bridge alternative. And so depending on which item you have kind of clicked and highlighted, that's going to be the one that is analyzed when you then go to run the analysis. So we're just going to do this one here for demonstration purposes. But we go to analysis settings, so we select the girder that we wanted, go to analysis settings. And there's a few things that we see here in this window. So the first thing, we've got rating methods. So this is allowable stress, load factor, and LRFD, LRFR. And so this is the analysis method or specification that'll be used for spec checking when you run that analysis. Member alternative means that it'll use one of those three options based on the spec version that's saved to the member alternative. So here where we see default rating method LFR, if member alternative is selected here, it means this is what it'll use when it runs that analysis. Then here we have analysis type. So line girder, 3D finite element model, superstructure definition, which again is similar to like member alternative, where it'll do it based on a default for that structure. And then we have 3D FEM vehicle path and distribution factor line girder. There's a lot to talk about here, so we won't get into too much detail, but I guess the couple of things to note: line girder is probably what you're going to be using most of the time. So that's a 2D finite element analysis. So the software will create that model based on the properties and everything that you've entered, run the vehicles to get all the loads and forces and stuff, and it'll do the AASHTO spec checking, and that uses, like the AASHTO distribution factors or whatever distribution factors you've entered in that distribution factor window. A couple of other options here. So there's 3D finite element model or 3D FEM. So that's where the software will build a full 3D model, and in that case, it'll use finite element analysis to determine the actual load distribution to different elements. So instead of using distribution factors, it'll actually compute the load distribution based on the properties that you've entered for the bridge. And then the third one, just to kind of note just that it exists here, is this distribution factor line girder. And so this is otherwise known as non-standard gauge. So this is basically when the AASHTO specifications and live load distribution factors are based on kind of a standard truck width, the 66 foot, but for something for permitting and stuff, you have some unusual vehicle configurations. So what this is it'll basically build a 3D model of the structure. It'll position that vehicle in certain locations and use that to determine distribution factors that can be used for non-standard gauge vehicles, and then it'll use those factors to run a line girder analysis. So it's kind of somewhere in between a 3D and a 2D analysis. And we can cover that in more detail in other trainings, but just pointing out that these are where you would set that analysis method. So here we see all the vehicles that in the library. This includes kind of a lot of random stuff, honestly, but and then here we've got vehicles. So you can either add individual vehicles here, like double click or like highlight and then use the arrows, or you can use a template. So Iowa DOT has analysis templates. And so basically what we can do is go to open template, select the template that we want, and you'll see it'll populate here with all of these vehicles. So this is set up to run this analysis.
And one thing about that too, Carolyn, it also populates the other tab. There's a tab with output
Yes.
On it. So there's some selected things that get set for the output. So
yes. Yeah, so, exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so it'll populate the vehicles, it'll populate output, and then it also will like set like a rating method. So like for example, there's a separate template for LFR and LRFR. If I select the LRFR one, it'll go ahead and change that automatically as well. let's see. I think this is an elevator bridge. I just want to run this. Okay. So go to analysis settings. We get that template. Then I'm going to say okay. Here, I'm going to hit analyze. This might take a second just because we got a lot of vehicles in there. Oh, why isn't it letting me? Nope, that was pretty quick. Okay. Um, yeah, that actually finished running before I could hold this up here to show you. But when you run that analysis, I'll run it again just so you see. It puts a bunch of kind of information in this window down here. And so this is just kind of some information about the analysis progress. There may sometimes be, I mean, if you want to review this just to kind of see what it's doing, it'll tell you a little bit about how it's kind of generating the model. There are sometimes some warnings and stuff in here. A lot of them are just sort of informational. It might be, um, different things. Like sometimes it'll say something that maybe some piece of information isn't entered, but if it's not that type of analysis that you're running, maybe that's fine. But either way, you can come down here and you can click those warnings, and it'll take you to the window that it's talking about. So always good to just review and make sure. Um, let's see. Okay, so we are. Okay, so once we run the analysis, and I'll try and kind of be brief here. I think we're trying to kind of cover a lot, and there's a few kind of important things here that, again, like I said, we'll touch back on in the upcoming trainings as well. So we're trying to kind of go over a lot here in a short amount of time. But once you run that analysis, there's a few kind of main places that we're going to look to see results. So the first one is the tabular results here. Okay, I don't know. I don't know why this is 0. Something weird with this bridge. Let me run a different bridge. I was changing things around with this one. I'm going to actually open up. So this is the two span plate girder from the tutorial. So I'm going to run this one just because I was uh, making some changes with that other bridge, and I didn't want to show something that has some kind of good results here. All right, so I'll rerun that, and then I'll show you the results we get here.
Yeah, and while this is running, we'll go through too. Like a lot of times, the primary thing you're worried about is the controlling rating, and we'll show you some ways where you could drill down to where that rating might be controlling. So if there's something in question and you get a low rating and you're not sure why, one of the things that we ask you do from a support standpoint is that you work your way down to where the calculations are for that rating. And if you see, so rating is basically it's the capacity minus the dead load divided by live load in a nutshell. So if you have a low rating, it could be because you have a low capacity or there's something crazy about your dead load or live load. So it's very good to look at those components before you file an issue and say, hey, there's something wrong. Because oftentimes it could be an input issue. You miss some reinforcement or something like that. So
Oh,
go
for
ahead,
sure.
Carolyn.
Thank you, Mark, for mentioning that. That's really important here. So what I did here is I ran this training bridge one, which I use this database for a lot of stuff to check stuff with development, and sometimes I just mess around with the bridge models, which is why this one is producing all zeros. Um, and so I ran the other one here just so I can kind of show you what you would more often see for results. But I'm really glad you mentioned that, Mark. One of the first things that you'll see here is tabular results. If you're getting zeros, we'll show you kind of how you can identify that. So the first place to look is here in the tabular results. It'll show you your load ratings, but it'll also show you the controlling location. So this is saying 40% through span 1. Then you can go into your spec check detail. This is in feet rather than percent, and I'm not going to do the math right now, but let's say right about here. You can go into the spec check, find that location, and then you can see here, it'll show you basically it'll show you red X's for anything that's not passing. It'll show you green checks for things that are, and then there's some other kind of informational or not applicable spec articles. And so you can kind of go through here and you can see all of the values that it's using to do the AASHTO checks. You can see the references to the AASHTO equations, the factors that are being used, all of these things. So, whether regardless of what rating you're getting, if you want to, verify what the software is actually doing, to make sure that you're comfortable with the engineering analysis, the spec check detail is where you're going to find a whole lot of that information. And like Mark said, if you run into something that, let's say your controlling rating is a lot lower than you think, this is the place to start. So tabular results will give you controlling location. Then you go into spec check, find that location, look at the things that aren't working and look at the values that are being used for them. And a lot of times that can give you kind of a clue to, if there's something that may have been entered incorrectly in the model, or if there is really some kind of an issue with the structure. I mean, you'll at least you'll be able to see why.
Yeah. One
So,
little hint on this. This is something I didn't find out until I used the software for a lot of years. If you go to the spec check window again, Carolyn, so if you highlight plate girder, just highlight the plate girder, and if you click on specification reference in the if you sort it, you can sort it by yeah, right there. So what that does is it ends up sorting it by spec article. So if you open up any one of them and then you just use the down arrow key, you can go through each of the locations for a particular spec article. So if you find the ones that fail, so I guess maybe open up the spec article and kind of put it on the side so you can see both the spec article window, and so make that a little bit smaller. If you have two screens, this works ideally. So if you use the arrow key and go down through the spec article numbers, and just it'll change the
you can see right here,
rotation.
it's changing
Yeah.
the location.
So it's kind of helpful if you're looking at a particular spec article that fails and you want to see the different locations. This is a way you can navigate it and see them quickly. So.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't even know that you could switch it that way. Learn something new every day.
Well, once I found it, it was pretty revealing. So
Yeah, I would always go through and do locations like that. But no, that's super helpful to see all of those in one place and be able to click through. Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's see. So all right, so we've got the bridge which was my other bridge? Yeah. So anyways, I guess just to say, there is a lot of information in here. Um, one of the other, I guess, just real briefly, the other couple of kind of outputs that we have here, this engine outputs, there will be some different, depending on the type of structure you're running, there are some kind of engine outputs here. And so this will just some information about how the model is generated and nodes and forces and different things. And you'll see different outputs depending on the type of structure that you're running. For trusses particularly and culverts, you're going to want to check engine outputs because there are some reports that are specific to those structure types. But this is, a place where you can always find more information about that model and how that model is built. And then we have results graphs here, so you can do forces, moments, and shears, and all that good stuff. Okay, so I know we're kind of running up towards the end of our time here. But so this is, and we'll kind of touch back on some of this stuff because it's a lot to sort of put out there all at once. So we're gonna, I guess, we will open it up to questions for anyone who's had a chance to kind of work through that Steel 1 tutorial. But before we do that, I want to talk about help and methods of solution and where you can find some more information about things. So we just talked about here once you run this analysis, there's kind of right up here, there's a few places you can get a lot of information about kind of what the program's doing, the information that it's using, um, all of this kind of stuff. However, there's a few other things that are really important. So one thing is when you're working your way kind of through things here, sometimes let's say you might come up to a window where you're it's asking you for a value and you're like, well, this could mean this or it could mean something else. Um, is this, I'm sorry, I'm looking for a multi-span pre-stress bridge. I don't think this is multi-span. That's okay. Hold on. Sorry, bear with me one second. Okay. Well, this doesn't really matter all that much. But the point is here that you can, from any window that you're in the software, you can click the F1 key and it'll pop up a menu and it'll tell you more information about what this window is actually asking for. So this is in the structure typical section. I hit the F1 key and this help menu pops up. And so this is kind of showing you, like, when you see here, superstructure definition reference line is within the bridge deck. Like, you might not know exactly what that means. And so that F1 help key will provide you with some more information about what this window is actually looking for. So that's usually a really good place to start as you're getting familiar with the software and setting up your bridge model. This will tell you a little bit more about exactly what the information it is that's looking for and like how it's used. Again, some of these topics have more information than others, but pretty much every window in the program will have this. And for some, like let's say this beam detail, so this is what I was looking for with the pre-stress. So these like beam projection details for simple span, it's kind of fairly straightforward as far as like center of bearing to end of beam. But when you have like pre-stress, if you have a bridge that's like single span for dead load and continuous for live load, the way that all of those beam ends like line up can be like a little bit, like if you look just at that window, it might not be super obvious, what it's actually looking for. Now we do have some schematics that sort of explain it, but again, this F1 help menu will usually provide you with more information about what's there. So that's always a good starting point. Another thing to mention is the methods of solution. So in version 7.6, we added basically a help ribbon up here, which makes it a little easier to find all this stuff all together. But in version 7.5 and prior, you can get to those methods of solution by going to this, when you're within the bridge model itself, click bridge workspace, and then you'll see this help here. And these are all the different AASHTO engines, like the engine for kind of different structure types. So let's say I go AASHTO LFR, method of solution. I can double click this and it'll open this PDF document, which is a big long document that basically goes through all of the analysis the software does and how it builds models and any kind of assumptions and stuff that are within that analysis. And so you'll see information here about, again, just kind of how it actually builds the finite element models, the logic behind that. So, if you're ever kind of, even after you've looked at like the spec check output detail, if you're not sure about something the software might be doing, there's a lot of information here in these methods of solution. There's also flowcharts in here for the specification checking that it does. And so then, like I said, these methods of solution are available for different like structure types and engines within the software. So like LFR, LRFR, timber, trusses, culverts, a whole bunch of different ones here. So like this is the culvert one, for example. It's showing, how it does load distribution, and a whole bunch of other things. So that is another really important resource. The other thing that I want to mention here is the website. So this, sorry, hold on one second. Yeah, okay. So this is ashtowareBRDR.org. And then basically I went to this tab here and like training. So this tab has some YouTube videos. It also has tutorials for a whole bunch of different structure types. For the virtual trainings that we're doing today and next week, I think we want to focus on the ones that are in the emails that Sean sent out. But if you do want to like take a look at other structure types, you can go through and find some tutorials and examples here. And oh, perfect. Yeah, I think Mark put the link in the chat there. And let's see. So and then so that's that. And then we've also got our support information as well. So if you do run it, like if you've looked at all that stuff and you're still running into issues, you can always email our support at brdr@promiles.com, so that they can help with installation support and other technical support. Now, there may be some kind of limitations on like bridge engineering technical support based on your license type, but we do have some really good people on support that'll help you work through any
And
issues.
a lot of the questions have been, many of them have already been asked. If you have questions on it, we have kind of pre-written articles that we call confluence articles that give hints on how to do things like, especially if you get involved with building 3D models. We have a lot of things written about that that can help guide you through um, building the model. But yeah, if it's something that is involved and needs to be forwarded to Sean, we'll let you know that. But generally, if they're just simple questions, we typically answer those.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. Trying to think here. So yeah, like I said, the help ribbon is something we're adding in 7.6 just so you can find all those methods of solution and stuff more easily. That also includes like links to things like this. But since a lot of you are going to be working with 7.5, just want to make sure you have this information. So Mark put the link here in the chat for the website with the tutorials and everything. And then just to kind of quickly review, if you want to get to those methods of solution, you do that from within a bridge workspace. Then you click this bridge workspace help, and then go here, method of solution, and then the F1 help menu that'll open from basically any window that you're in the software. You just hit the F1 key on your keyboard, and it'll open up that menu. So I think that covers a lot of what we were gonna kind of go over today. One thing, so we
One
talked
final
about
thing, Carolyn,
the
and I'm going to put this in the chat as well. Um, there's a technical notes section on the website, and I put a link in that. And if you go to it, it'll probably ask you for a password. The password is simple. It's just BRDR. We just put a password there to keep people from trolling it. But the technical notes site, and I'll just share my screen for just a second. Or if you want to go to it, why don't you go to it, Carolyn, since you already, uh, that's okay. So it's under, it should be under there, technical
technical
notes.
note. There we go.
Yeah, and if you type the BRDR, it'll take you there. And so these get issued whenever there's a critical bug or something in the program that is not going to be fixed right away, and uh, you either need a workaround or we need to explain it to you. It'll appear in these technical notes. And so all they are is PDF files with an explanation of what the issue is, and just so that you're aware of it. Usually there's a workaround issued with it, and then a long-term solution of when it'll be fixed. So this is a current one right now related to stringer floor beam members, and it's just there for your information so that you're aware of it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's really good to point out. When there are critical things that come up, we will do a patch to the software and stuff, but on things that, for example, it's like a known issue, but there's a workaround for it, this is super helpful. So thank you for mentioning that, Mark. Um, the one, I guess, kind of last thing here I wanted to just talk briefly about is the steel tutorial. So when we sent out the info for this virtual training, we sent the PDF for this steel tutorial. Now, I know we did activate the licenses somewhat recently, so uh, some of you may not have had time to work through the tutorial yet. For any of you who have, we can certainly stay on for a little bit here and answer any questions that you may have. If you have not had a chance to work through this, I would strongly encourage you to go ahead and do that. And we can also answer any questions in the next training as well. Just if anyone hasn't had a chance to yet. With that being said, though, if anyone has worked through this and does have any questions for us about that or anything else, I think do we have any questions in the chat on anything we uh, haven't addressed? I'm just checking the chat here.
We've covered all the ones that have been asked.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, let's see. I think that pretty much covers, I think, a lot of what we wanted to cover here today. I mean, if anyone else, has anything they want to add, we can certainly do that. Like I said, we hope that if you're planning on attending the next couple of trainings and, if you want to work through this tutorial as well as the ones, just to really mention this as well. So the next training is going to be culverts. So it would be good to work through those tutorials before the training if possible. But again, we'll be, covering the thing that's in those. So.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. And if there aren't any questions, and you could always send them to Sean as a follow-up, and we'll do our best to answer them. Sean, do you have any further things to say before we close out?
I'll jump in with a couple Iowa specific things just to keep in mind. As they mentioned, for if you're making a bridge, you need to have a unique structure MBI and a unique bridge ID. For Iowa bridges, many counties have identical bridge IDs in Iowa. So I'd recommend either just putting the FHWA number in for both of those, or if you actually want to the bridge ID, you might need to add in a little something more to make it unique, maybe the county or the city name or something like that. So keep that in mind. Um, and also, if you guys haven't found all the BRR resources for us, you can go to the Sims page and go to resources, and then there's a BRR section there for you to add everything in, or for you to access all the tutorials, all the templates we're making. Um, we have information on the libraries and the different analysis things we're making. So you can go there and look at those. So I think that was all I was going to add. Is there any questions? Great. I'm not hearing any or seeing any. So I'll let you guys go, but if you do have a question or if something's too long for typing it out and you want to talk about it a little more, I'll hang out a little bit longer if you guys have anything you want to ask. So thanks everybody.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.